Alright, greetings Pedro people, to a short video on the preparation of the San Pedro Pachanoi cactus. We got a good specimen here, about 1 meter long, and after I've used a range of tools from wood cutting tools to angle grinders, I figured out that these things actually work the best to de-spine a cactus. Well, these nail clipping devices you can get at your local pharmacy or beauty shop. They come in all sorts of ranges, and what I just do, I just run across each of the ridges and basically just clip them off. You don't need to cut out the entire areoles. I figured that out. Some people do that, but it's just most important to clip the actual spines. Some people say they do contain strychnine, which is a neurotoxin, which is obviously not something you would want in your medicine after you prepared and cooked it. Also, if you do it this way, you notice you'd be saving a lot of the green flesh. So the old traditional beginner's way, using a sharp little knife or wood carving tools, you lose quite a bit of substance around the areoles by making a cut or incision and then lever the areoles out of the cactus. So this way I can really cut precisely almost inside the areoles and then just de-spine the entire ridge very easily. It depends on the length and the thickness of the spines. So some cacti, not the Pachanoi. Pachanoi is known for having very short and small thin spines, but some Brigezii has got rather almost woody or twig-like spines. Then I have resorted to even using an angle grinder and just aligning it with my body and then very carefully clipping each of the rather big spines. So as you can see, this is a rather simple process. Especially if you've got a few meters to prepare. If you're just handling 1 meter for yourself, then I guess you can cut out each and every of the areoles like you often see on many YouTube videos. Alright, so after we have de-spined all the columns of the cactus, we are now going to what I call the filleting process. So I've cut these into foot-long sections, and that entirely depends on, you can cut them shorter. I use a rather large stock pot which I've got here, so I'll make sure I get the most out of it, or I can put the most segmented strips in there. Or in case if I want to freeze it, which is also something that other people do, you prepare it and you don't want to cook it up on the same day or the next day, so it goes into big Tupperware boxes. And so what I do, you have the star shape. Well, this one's rather round because it's got quite a big girth, and so what I would do, I basically find a section here where I can cut off 2 of them, and then I would cut alongside the lines of the columns. Make sure you've got a sharp knife, it's a lot easier. And so I would basically do this, and I'll do that then with every other column thereafter. This is how it goes. So basically we're cutting away the core, which does not contain as many alkaloids, or some people even say they don't contain any alkaloids. The next step would be, now you have a column like this, and to also make it easier to fillet off the white flesh, I then cut along the actual ridge of the areoles, then basically turn it upside down, and you can fillet just alongside and cut off mostly all the white flesh, and then you are left with a strip like this with the waxy skin still on it. So some people actually like to peel the fresh cactus, which is quite a bit of work, and if you have a lot of cactus to prepare, that's why I'm showing you a different way, which is a bit more effective and not as labor intensive. And basically, so I'll just chuck these all in here, and that's what I do with the entire cactus until I've got a box or two filled up. So basically 7 or 8 meters that are used to prepare in one batch fills up my stock pot, which we put on the boil later when everything is prepared. So if you end up with the tip of the cactus, then the constellation is a bit different, or it's basically you can just cut right from the top because the core is not so strong, and then basically you're still segmenting each of the columns, which then sort of end up looking like sort of dragon fingers. And what I do then, just kind of cut along here, get that sort of part of the center core out, and then turn it around and proceed in the same fashion, cutting along the root and fill it just like you did with the centerpieces. Okay, so now that everything is chopped and prepared, we got a whole stock pot full of strips, and I've added 1 kettle of boiling water already, so now I'm just adding a second one. It's kind of estimating how much water to add. Obviously it depends on how much cactus you have prepared or want to prepare, whatever the volume is. You just want to make sure that it's all not covered up, but once I set the stove on high to make the water boil, and then obviously once it boils I set it just to simmer. So not all the cactus has to be covered up to the top in water, it's just that we put the lid on and then we just let it do its thing. And obviously it's going to reduce in volume, it'll sag a little bit, and then I can add a few more strips, so ready to make and utilize all the space that's in the pot for each session of cooking. Alright, so now it's been on the stove for about an hour. The water has slowly come to a boil. You can see the more green ones were some of those I added later, and now the whole volume has actually shrunk a little bit more, so I can still add another handful, a few, to fill it up right to the brim, and then we just let it sit overnight, usually about 6 or 8 hours or even longer. Small heat, so the purpose is obviously to soften the flesh, which then tomorrow we will scrape off the back on trays, and then the story continues. Just to add, I've obviously now filled it up to the max. We've got the pot really full right to the brim, and when it starts all shrinking down a little bit in about an hour, then I'll add the juice of 2-3 lemons, fresh lemon squeezed down, maybe just like you know, a good dash of apple cider vinegar, which we got here somewhere. You can see that, just normal regular organic or unfiltered apple cider vinegar, so half a cup or like double shot of that in there. So the lemon juice and the vinegar will actually help extracting or draw the alkaloids out of the green flesh of the cactus. Okay, greetings people, good morning. Here we got the cooked up cactus strips, all been simmered overnight. We got Andrew on board today as well. He's going to help us with the scraping. So what we do now, we'll take a portion or helping of these nicely cooked strips, and as you can see the flesh is now gone all very soft, and what we do, we put it on big baking trays, and instead of peeling it from the top, we just scrape it off from the bottom, which is a lot easier and not as labor intensive. And then once we're done, whatever is scraped off, the flesh of the cactus goes into another big pot, and we will just collect it there and then cook it up again in another session. Alright, so after scraping, for the last 2 hours on our trays, we have a reasonable amount of juice that has now been, it's already cooked, and that's what's left after simmering it overnight. And then everything that was scraped off is the flash, which we got here in this bucket, which later goes back into this pot, which I will strain just now with little bits that are still floating in there. And then all of this green flash goes back into the stock pot or any other pot, and then I will simmer or cook it again for another 8 hours or sometime overnight. And then tomorrow we will then also strain whatever was cooked overnight, which are these guys here, and then they will go back, the liquid of both will be mixed together, and then we will cook it down to a reasonable volume. So in here we're just doing a bit of filtration of whatever was the juice in the pot, just to filter out like some debris and slightly bigger pieces. So now we got our box of filtered juice that will just stay in there until tomorrow. If it's cold enough outside, it can just be there, otherwise you can just store it in the fridge. And here we got our stock pot now, which is empty. All of our scrapings that came with our scraping session, which will now go back into the pot. And as you can see, it contains plenty of liquid, so there's no need to add any extra water when putting it back on the stove. Also, the water I've added previously, the 2 kettles, or maybe like 3 to 4 liters, wasn't tap water. It was obviously fresh spring water from the mountain or any other natural source. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that for a little while. Drop in there. So here we go. Everything is back to a nice simmer with our cactus chunky broth. I want to make sure it's not burning or boiling too much, since now this has got a tendency to burn at the bottom. So either cook it very slow or keep stirring it sort of occasionally. And now I'm also just going to add, while this is in the pot for another, let's say 4, 6, 8 hours. Sometimes I'll just leave it overnight. Just add another bit of apple cider vinegar, so we're making sure that all the good alkaloids being cooked out the cactus. Good morning, people. So now we have had the pot on the stove pretty much all night long. It simmered for good 8 hours cooking, and then I just left it on low heat so it stays slightly warm. And now we're going to strain it, and just using a normal colander here or a strainer, and then a piece of mutton or cheesecloth. Just remember to wet it or soak it before, otherwise if you pour it in, then it will just sit due to the water tension. So now we're just gonna, usually this ends up with like 3 fillings. And you just let it sit for 10-15 minutes. Let it run, and then we'll squeeze it and get the last bit of liquid out of our precious cactus. Just don't make it too full, because then the becomes difficult to handle it once you've got it wrapped up in the cheesecloth. So, right, ready to squeeze. Left it in there for a while. So we're lifting up our cheesecloth. And as you can see, you just have to work it gently, don't squeeze too hard to make it pop. And so grab it by the ball. Start getting all the liquid out. And if you do this long enough, it reduces to sort of tennis ball, in my case tennis ball size, squashed camouflage checkered ball, which I'll show you now after a little while of doing this. So while the last lot is in for the final squeeze, there's about 2 balls already that came out of it. You can see the camouflage kind of patterns, and I'm just going to clean the pot. There's a bit of burn residue at the bottom, but that's perfectly normal when you simmer such a huge volume overnight. And then we will blend the 2 liquids and put it back on the stove and reduce the volume. So now we've got everything strained, and here we have all the juice from yesterday's separation, from the first cook, basically. I'm just going to quickly stir it up. And so that goes back into the pot. And then we add what we've just cheeseclothed and strained today. We're around the 10-litre mark. Usually I think if I prepare the amount of cactus, I'm always between 10 and 11 litres. And then I like to reduce it to a volume, basically a metre of cactus. Or this is quite big cactus because they have big girth. Usually, like they say, a foot, 30 centimetres is one good dose, and this is quite potent cactus, so I've gone down to 25, so I get 4 potions or doses per meter. And then I like to have a 200 milliliter dose, which is also easy to play around with for a quarter of a dose, or a shot glass 25 ml, or half a dose 100 ml. And so I end up with, if I have 8 meters of cactus, basically I'll cook it down from 10 liters or 11 to 6.4, 6.5, which is 34 doses at 200 milliliters. So I'm just bringing the juice to a boil. It takes a little while if you have a bigger pot or larger volumes, and then obviously I leave the lid on for it to boil quicker, and then once it starts boiling and steaming, I'll just place the lid ajar to leave space for evaporation. And then we will check on the indicator. This pot has got a measuring scale, and I can see it's on 10 liters now, so once we're down to 7, 6.5, then we'll be done.